another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back after what was a wonderful night in the UEFA Champions League. A Gas Galoa. Real Madrid game had 7 goals. PSG game had 8 goals. The Liverpool game had 5. The Arsenal game had 4. You know, beautiful, beautiful performances. It was a Gas Galoa across. Real Madrid will have to worry about that, upward defending, but they'll be pretty pleased with Kylian Mbappe's clinicalness in front of goal because he scored 4 against Olympiacos. Arsenal had to grind it out after poor first half. They went big in the second half, and oh my, Bayern Munich could not touch them, could not get anywhere near them. So we'll be discussing that in this beautiful morning. It's a Thursday morning at 40 minutes past the hour of 9 a.m. Tonight, the UEFA Europa League as well as the UEFA Conference League action will be on. And if we do have time, sufficient time, in part of this broadcast, we will be discussing or we will be giving you the lineup of fixtures that will be coming your way come tomorrow's game between the different sides. I know for a fact that Nottingham Forest, Aston Villa are going to be in action in the Europa League as far as Premier League teams are concerned. I know for a fact that Crystal Palace themselves have an engagement and things like that. But allow me to have our audios tested and make sure everything does check out before we even proceed any further for the purposes of this particular broadcast. But the 2 big questions we will attempt to answer in the context of this broadcast. Apologies, looks like our audios are okay. Oh, sorry. Like I said, we'll attempt to answer 2 questions that have made the rounds on social media, on TV, on radio, or in media, generally, in as far as football is concerned, in as far as sport is concerned. And those 2 questions are Arsenal, the best team in Europe right now? Is Declan Rice the best midfielder there is at the moment? We will attempt to answer those questions. Whether you agree or disagree, we'll give you what our thoughts are, and you will let us know what you think about those respective submissions. But before we dive into all that, here is what did transpire. I think there's only one place to start really if we are going to digest it all. But before we get in the thick and depth of it all, I think I should give you a run of results from what transpired last night in as far as the UEFA Champions League was concerned. Match day 5 continued on Wednesday night with Paphos sharing the spoils against Monaco in a 2-2 draw, while Copenhagen beat up against Kairat Almaty by 3-2. Those games are coming, those results coming in the earlier kickoffs of the evening for Wednesday, and then in the late kickoffs that came at 11 p.m. Real Madrid beat Olympiacos by 4-3. It was a bit of a nervous ending, but they managed to hold it out thanks to that quadruple, of course, from the French star Kylian Mbappe. Really, really wonderful performance from him as an individual. He scored the first half hat-trick, really very impressive. Then Chiquinho, Mehdi Taremi and Ayoub El Kabi were the goal scorers for Olympiacos for what turned out to be mere consolations for the Evangelis Marinakis owned side. Then Sporting CP beat up against Club Brugge by 3-0. Jovan Quenda, Luis Suarez, and Francesco Trincao were the goal scorers in there. Jovan Quenda, remember, he was signed by Chelsea and left. That was this year in January. And no, was it this year in January? Yes, and he was left out there on loan for a season and a half. So yeah, that's Jovan Quenda for you, a player that Man United equally also wanted to sign. Then in the second half against Eintracht Frankfurt, Atalanta were scintillating, scoring 3 in the space of just 5 minutes. Ademola Lookman, Anderson, and Charles de Cataleya really scoring to make sure that Atlanta won that game by 3 goals to 0. But like I said, 3 goals in 5 minutes, and that was it. So Atlanta were winners on the night. Then Atletico de Madrid went and beat up against Inter Milan by 2 goals to 1 at the Wanda Metropolitano. Julian Alvarez scoring in the 9th minute, while Piotr Zielinski scored the equalizer in the 54th minute before Jose Mario Gimenez scored in the 3rd minute of stoppage time to win it all for Atletico de Madrid. The other game saw PSG put 5 past Tottenham Hotspur, implying that they have conceded as many as 9 goals in just 2 fixtures, having lost to Arsenal over the weekend by 4 goals to 1. Realist, they have scored 4. Now, the scoring of 4 may sound impressive, but the idea of conceding as many as 9 goals in 2 games for manager of Thomas Frank's caliber, whose one of his prowesses was his defensive solidity, having a team that plays direct football and leaves a lot of question marks. Do some managers struggle with small team mentality when they join big teams? Those questions are now being put forward to Thomas Frank. We saw those questions rise to the top when Graham Potter left Brighton and Hove Albion and went to Chelsea. We remember that, So there have been such question marks in the past. We saw those questions arise for Nuno Espirito Santo when he left Wolverhampton Wanderers and ended up at Tottenham Hotspur. Do some managers struggle with their mid-table or small team mentality when they cross over to big teams? That's a huge question. But Richarlison opened the scoring for Tottenham in the 35th minute with a brilliant goal. Vitinha restored parity, but he ended up scoring a hat-trick in that game in the 45th minute to send it 1-1 at halftime. But then in the 53rd minute and in the 76th minute, he scored a penalty. There, a brilliant performance and a hat-trick from the Portuguese central midfielder. Now, how often do you hear that a holding midfielder has scored a hat-trick in a game? It's as rare as rain in the desert, really, and yet it did anyway. And for me, that's why I thought he deserved to finish third, or possibly even better in the Ballon d'Or standings as those that were awarded in September. We know that Lamine Yamal was, put second, and then I think Rafinha came 5th, Mo Salah in there at 4th. I did disagree with those standings, but it was what it was. But Fabian Ruiz, William Pacho were the other goal scorers for PSG, while Rando Colomwani scored a brace against his bosses, because remember he's on loan to Tottenham Hotspur from PSG. He scored a brace in the 50th minute and in the 72nd minute, respectively. Realist, PSG completed the game with a manless following the sending off of Lucas Hernandez in the 3rd minute of stoppage time. So that was the game in itself. Then Liverpool. How low can Liverpool sink? Because I think this is as low as it comes. I think this is a new all-time low. This is a new all-time low. It doesn't get any worse than this. Losing 9 games out of 11, 12 games. It's just bad. It's just bad. Not just bad for Liverpool, but for the manager and all the optics that you may want to look at it or to bring into consideration in the mold of that fact, And last night's loss to PSV Eindhoven was sort of to cement that. But let's go back to when it all started. Liverpool went, you remember that game in which Hugo Ekitike was given a red card for taking off his shirt after scoring the second goal against Southampton? Yes. That was a victory against Southampton in the 3rd round. From there on, they went on to lose, I think, 4 consecutive games, losing to Crystal Palace by 2-1, lost to Galatasaray in the UEFA Champions League by 0-0, lost to Chelsea by 2-1, lost to Man United by 2-1, 4 consecutive losses, 4 out of 4 lost. Then on on the 50th outing, that was against Eintracht Frankfurt. They won a game of football, beating Eintracht Frankfurt by 5-1. You know, you remember that beautiful night with the burst of assists for Florian Wirtz. And, you know, people are saying, oh, he can only perform against German teams. Then they returned to the Premier League and lost their fourth consecutive game against Brentford by 3-2. After that, they met Crystal Palace in the fourth round of the EFL Cup and lost that game by 3-0. After that, everybody thought they had bounced back when they beat up against Aston Villa by 2-0, and even put in an even better performance when they met Real Madrid in the subsequent midweek, when they beat up against Real Madrid by 0-0. It could have been more had it not been for the heroics of Thibaut Courtois in that game. You know, then moved on and played Manchester City. This was prior to the international break of November. They lost to Man City by 3-0 and returned from the international break, hoping that they were going to pick themselves up and start with a victory against Nottingham Forest. At least my prediction had been that they would win that game by 2-1. Alas, they lost by 3-0. And yesterday, like I said, it was a new all-time low as they lost by 4-1. Virgil van Dijk, first of all, considered a very stupid penalty, having his arms all over the air as if he was a volleyball player or a basketball player attempting for a block, you know. And then they consider penalty in the 6th minute. Ivan Perisic makes no mistake, steps up and converts that. Lucky for them, 10 minutes later, Dominic Szoboszlai scored to restore parity. Of course, it was a shot up from Cody Gakpo that the goalkeeper parries in the direction of Dominic Szoboszlai, and he taps it back in, and it's 1-1. And I thought, well, here we go. Liverpool are back. They're going to fight out of this one. Well, it finished 1-1 at halftime, and in the second half, Gus Til scored in the 56th minute to make it 2-1 for the visitors. And then Kohaibi Driochi, I hope I'm pronouncing the name well, went and scored in the 73rd minute and in the 2nd minute of stoppage time to make it 4-1 for PSV Eindhoven. Now, I understand that PSV Eindhoven beat up against Liverpool last season, I think by 3-2, but by the time Liverpool met them, they were already almost guaranteed of finishing at the summit of the UEFA Champions League standings. They're in a good place. It's a game that mattered less to them, whether they won it or lost it, other than bragging rights. But yesterday, that was a very, very important game, not just in the context of the UEFA Champions League, in terms of the table standings at the moment, where Liverpool find themselves all, but just on recent performances. They've been poor. So Liverpool showed up and got beat. Now, when it came to ball possession, they had it to the tune of 58%. They had the most attempts on goal with 24 shots on goal. 8 were on target, but they were not clinical. Hugo Ekitike being suspect in that. Mo Salah firing blanks. Cody Gakpo, Federico Chiesa tried when he came on. Alexander Isak had a shot on target. They created the moments. They were not clinical, and at the highest level, you're going to get punished. It's just that simple. If you create your chances and do not take them at the highest level, you're going to get punished, and Liverpool got punished. That means in the last 3 games, Liverpool have conceded a whopping 10 goals, whereas they've only scored 1. They considered 3 against Man City and 3 against Nottingham Forest, and then 4 against PSV Eindhoven. It's that bad. You look around that Liverpool side with all the quality that lays within those players and cannot find a single player that is going to inspire them to a victory, that is going to motivate them to rise up to the best team that they are. The best team in terms of player quality. You have Isak, you have Ekitike, you have Mo Salah, you have Cody Gakpo, you have Virgil van Dijk, you have Alisson Ramsey-Specker, you have McAllister, you have Gravenberch, you have Szoboszlai, all that is player quality. You have Chiesa, Now, unfortunately for Liverpool, their core spine, have fallen so off that they cannot motivate themselves, let alone motivate others. And that's Alisson Ramsey-Specker. He's been in and out of the team through injury. Virgil van Dijk as captain, and arguably one of the best centre backs that has ever been in the Premier League. Mohamed Salah up front, nowhere near good enough. Nowhere near good enough. So, according to reports, Liverpool are set for a crisis meeting to discuss the future or the situation or the poor results that have befallen Liverpool over the last set of games, as we have enlisted them in that run of results. Particularly, this is according to Ndia Kaila News. This is on X. Hi. What's your name? Mary. Hi, Mary. How are you doing? Good to have you on the broadcast. So, the Kaila News say, and I quote, Liverpool Football Club is holding an emergency meeting tomorrow, which is today, Thursday, to discuss the pressing issue of the team's poor performance and the future of the manager Arne Slot, according to respected sources. They go on to say that with Michael Edwards, the CEO of the Football for Fenway Sports Group, that's FSG, and Sporting Director Richard Hughes will attend the meeting. This is a critical moment for the club. High-level officials from FSG are ready to make tough decisions, including the potential removal of Arne Slot, despite the initial plan to give him until January. The urgency of the situation cannot be overstated. The team's struggles may force their hand sooner than expected. As the clock is ticking and the stakes have never been higher for Liverpool. Mary says Besiktas or Galatasaray. I've never paid attention to Turkish football that much, but I do appreciate Galatasaray. I mean, the biggest team in Turkish football. No offense to you if you're a Besiktas fan, you know. But yeah, I do have some sort of acquaintances from Turkey, one of them being Safa Ali, who is a Fenerbahce fan, by the way. So thank you for asking that question, really, or that poll, those options as you've outlaid them. So really, that's what is happening at Liverpool. And I mean, Yemi Karagas said this before, and I'll sort of repeat his words. He says Liverpool are not known for sacking managers, and they have never sacked a manager who has won them a league title. Arne Slot could be the first, you know, that no matter how bad things have gone, for a manager that has guided them to silverware, they've just not been branded themselves as a sacking club, you know, that eventually those managers have had to leave their jobs or resign themselves, really. And the question is, can Liverpool wait for that period? Because unfortunately for Arne Slot, this has happened almost a little too early in the season. Almost a little too early in the season. Because if this was happening after the halfway mark of the season, with Liverpool having qualified, let's say, already for the knockout stages of the UEFA Champions League, that there was somewhere, okay, I know they're not far off the top 5. It's only 2 points that separate them between Crystal Palace and them in 12th place. But if, let's say, they were third in the Premier League, I do not think there will be any tensions whatsoever. You know, if this was happening in March, in Feb, March, or March, April, May, you know, you sort of take a chill pill about it and say, okay, we'll see out the season and assess the situation when the season ends. But it's too way into the season to not consider your options. The last manager Liverpool sacked was Brendan Rodgers back in 2015. We're talking about a Brendan Rodgers, manager who had saw Liverpool compete at the highest level. They were really, really competitive. They competed really well for the 2013-2014. For the 2013-2014 Premier League title and fell short. Manchester City won that. Then the subsequent season, 2014-2015, that's when he gets sacked and Chelsea were crowned champions because Jose Mourinho, in his second coming, he was guiding that Chelsea team to the triumph. You know, I think Yeah, that should be the period, you know. So there's a lot to critique about Liverpool, but sometimes it's hard to justify. Just yesterday, prior to that game, we did put out a video on the channel, and please, I urge you to go and watch it. Whether in which we are asking, will Arne Slot capitulate under pressure? Will he capitulate under pressure? Because I feel he's come under a lot of pressure, and I do not know whether he knows how to deal with it. I do not think he's ever been in this kind of position in his career as a manager, coming out of Feyenoord to come to Liverpool, guide Liverpool to the Premier League triumph in his debut campaign. I do not know whether he knows how to deal with this kind of situation, for the simple fact that he may have never found himself in this kind of situation. So that's what part of what makes it really, really hard for him. You know? So, anyways, we'll leave it at that for the case of Liverpool. And now, quickly, let's run to what was our main event on the night, because for those of you that were part of our 2-hour-long watch along in the night, that game finished 3-1 in favor of Arsenal, with Lennart Karl scoring what turned out to be a mere consolation for that Bayern Munich side. He scored in the 32nd minute to cancel out Julian Timber's 26-minute header that had given Arsenal the lead at the Emirates Stadium. And in the second half, it was Noni Madueke who scored in the 69th minute to make it 2-1, and eventually Gabriel Martinelli scoring his 4th goal of the campaign in as far as the UEFA Champions League is concerned to make it 3-1. Now, in the context of the game itself, I thought Bayern Munich were the better side in the first half. Yes, they did not create many goal scoring opportunities, but they were the better team. They dominated possession. They really won the 50-50s. They pressed really, really well. And in the way they play, it's sort of a little bit similar to the way the Arsenal play, or at least did play against Tottenham Hotspur over the weekend, is that they have their center forward, and particularly for Bayern Munich, it's a Harry Kane, coming out of that sort of position to play so deep in midfield. Now, over the weekend, we saw Mikel Merino doing that, coming out of that false number 9 wall to come so deep in midfield. Now, the challenge for Tottenham Hotspur, who played with the back 3 in Kevin Danso, Christian Romero, and Mickey van der Ven, in the first half of that game, is that they could not decide whether they should track Mikel Merino wherever he went. Now, contrary to that, what Arsenal did, they assigned William Saliba to track Harry Kane wherever he went. It didn't matter whether he went high up the left wing, or whether he was at the center of the pitch, or whether he drifted to the right. William Saliba kept track of him. He went with him wherever he went. He just kept track of him. And at some point in the game, when William Saliba gets gets booked with a yellow card, there's a moment where it appears to be a swap of roles between him and Christian Mosquera, who I thought had a decent performance, to then track Harry Kane. That's how they went about it. Now, strategy-wise, Bayern Munich are the kind of team that mark you man-to-man. They deny you those spaces. They go toe-to-toe with you. They want to win the ball really, really fast. They want to make it uncomfortable for you to play, to dominate possession, to string, a couple of passes to create that momentum. And they did that effectively well in the first half, But in the second half, things changed. And whereas they still won the overall ball possession to the tune of 55% compared to Arsenal's 45%, it was Arsenal that dominated the key affairs in shots on goal, 14 compared to Bayern Munich's 6. 8 of those for Arsenal were on target, and only 2 for Bayern Munich. So that in itself tells you the kind of game it was. Arsenal committed 16 fouls. Both teams got 2 yellow cards. Arsenal had 6 corner kicks compared to 1 for Bayern Munich. And I think 4 of those, if not 5, for Arsenal, the corners came in the second half. In the second half, they were just all over Bayern Munich. I thought they Fort Petter, Declan Rice with another man of the match kind of performance, with the captain's performance. So the question is, are Arsenal the best team in Europe? Is Declan Rice the best midfielder in Europe right now? Because the kinds of performances he's had in recent games, suggest that. Go back to that game against Tottenham Hotspur, man of the match kind of performance. Come to yesterday's game, he was awarded man of the match because it was that good a performance. The way he oscillates in that midfield, going back and forth as a box-to-box midfielder, is impressive to watch. He's the kind of player who, even when he goes over to take a corner kick, appears to be gasping for air, with sometimes his mouth agape for a moment, trying to catch his breath. Is a kind of player that never stops running, whether it's in the 90th minute, whether it's in the 50th minute of the game. He just keeps running. It's like he has 3 lungs or something. I think his tenacity or his tenaciousness, his relentlessness, his tirelessness is something to really, really rave about for that Arsenal team. It's something for his teammates to pick a leaf off of. He just never stops running. He never stops grinding it out. And when Bukayo Saka, who was the day's captain, got withdrawn and he got handed the armband for that short period of time before Martin Odegaard came on and he handed it over to him, he sort of seemed to switch in another sort of gear, to say, I'm wearing the armband and I'm leading this team. We know he's vocal. We know he's motivational. We know he's the guy that pats his teammates on the back. He's the guy that cools tempers down when they're rising. And it got me thinking, watching Declan Rice yesterday, is he Arsenal's most important player at the moment? Because you remember when Gabriel Magalhaes got injured, and we spoke about that, and we said he was the best. They were losing one of the most significant players in their team or squad, in Gabriel Magalhaes, and that's true. That's not changed. Yes, over the weekend we saw it was Pierre Hincap who started in that centre-back role alongside William Saliba, and last night it was Christian Mosquera who started alongside William Saliba, and both pairings looked unfazed against both opponents. Well, we are waiting to see what the pairing will be against Chelsea. But one thing is guaranteed: for as long as William Saliba is fit, he will retain that spot. I think watching those two performances for Pierre Hincap against Tottenham Hotspur, you could say that Tottenham Hotspur were lesser a threat because they did not cause Arsenal that much trouble. But watching those two performances of Pierre Hincap and Christian Mosquera yesterday against Bayern Munich, I mean, one would argue that defensively, there's not anything to fault for them, that if, Gabriel Magalhaes returned yesterday, you would ponder delaying his return. Sort of, because they've done okay. I know it's been only one game for each, but for Christian Mosquera, we had already seen that. Like I said, all season, for all the minutes he's played, he's only looked bad in one game. That was the first half against Newcastle, and he got withdrawn at halftime, and they brought on, William Saliba, because he had started the game alongside Gabriel Magalhaes. Then Pierre Hincap had not started the Premier League game until that game against Tottenham Hotspur. And the importance of the game, the significance of that game. But you look at the composure he had, and it's more like he knew the importance of that game. It's like he had played in that derby before, So now I look at it all and bring it back to Declan Rice, and I ask myself, is Declan Rice the most important Arsenal player there is today? I could make that case, because you look around and think, for all the squad depth that Arsenal have, we've seen Eberechi Eze sort of fill that void in the number 10 position really well for Martin Odegaard, although the two players are two different tens in terms of stature or playing style. But he's done well. He scored a hat-trick against Tottenham Hotspur. Yesterday, he created an assist. Again, with that chip of the ball over the top. He's done that thrice. 2 of them have been assists against Manchester City for Martinelli, and yesterday for Martinelli against Bayern Munich. And he also did it for Declan Rice against Tottenham Hotspur. That time, Declan Rice did not score. Vicario served, So I look in that Arsenal squad where in the centre back with that Gabriel Magalhaes, you have Ricardo Carafiori, you have Piero Hincap, you have Christian Mosquera, all those that you can look onto to fill the void left by Gabriel Magalhaes. You look at right back, you have Urian Timber, you have Ben White. You go to left back, you have Miles Lewis Kelly, you have Hincap, you have Carafiori, whichever way you want to roll the dice. You come to that midfield, you have Martin Zubimendi, you have Christian Norgard, you have Mikel Merino, you have Declan Rice. But I do not think there is a player that is as good as Declan Rice when it comes to that box-to-box ball. I do not think Mikel Merino can give you that, you know. I certainly do not think so. So, and somebody said it, and I do not say this is going to be gospel truth, or I do not want to say that if in the event it happened, that would be the case for it. But they said, and I recall they said that if Arsenal lose Declan Rice, they won't be the same team. Well, that sounds simplistic to say, but we've seen Arsenal miss as many players as 7. Kai Havertz, Gabriel Jesus, Victor Gyökeres, all 4-3 players. Captain Martin Odegaard, Noni Madueke, and you know, they've looked unfazed. They have missed them, particularly if they were available for the Sunderland game. Possibly, maybe the result would have been different. But you sort of look at that and can't help but think how good they were. You know? So, whereas if he, God forbid, if he got an issue, even if it was a game suspension, even if it was an injury, he doesn't get injured that often. I know he had an issue prior to one of the international breaks. I think it was the October international break or something. I do not think they have a player similar to Declan Rice, but I think they would cope without him if that were to be the case. And that's the beauty of Arsenal squad depth. You know, you looked at that bench yesterday and look at the players that they could bring on. Leandro Trossard got injured in the first half. Look who they brought on, Noni Madueke. I do not fancy Noni Madueke at the left side of the pitch. I fancy him to the right, you know, but that's where Bukayo Saka is. And Bukayo Saka, even though he's not delivering in terms of goals and assists recently, he's still a big threat. He causes teams troubles, you know. They brought on Gabriel Martinelli. They brought on Martin Odegaard. They withdrew Miles Lewis Kelly for Ricardo Carafiori. That was all quality all over the pitch. You know, that's how good they are. You know, that they can dice and chop with all those players. And the beauty for Arsenal, or the good thing for Arsenal, or why I'm happy for them in this particular moment in the season, is that as they head towards a very, very busy point in the season, because we know that December, January tend to have a congestion of fixtures, particularly for December. The Premier League has this adrenaline rush of wanting to get to the halfway mark of the season as soon as possible. Like they just woke up and realized, oh, we need to get to the halfway mark of the season, you know? And so far they played 12 games. So that means there's still 7 games to be played, you know? Now, in the month of December alone, or at least until 1st Jan or thereabout, the first weekend of Jan, you have 7 games to play, or at least 6 Premier League games, you know, because November 30th, that's the weekend, they'll play their 13th game of the season in as far as the Premier League is concerned. Now, that means in the month of December, you have to play six games in the Premier League to get to the halfway point of the season, which is 19 games, you know. Now, when you look at that, it's not in isolation that it's only the Premier League games, because one would say, yeah, 4 weeks in a month, 2 weekends and 2 games in between midweek, you know, and it's done. But there's UEFA Champions League games. And within the month of December, I stand to be corrected, but I think there's 2 games, you know. So that makes it 8 games. If you're like Arsenal and you're still in the you're into the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup, then that means there's the 9th game for you to play. And soon after that, once we get into January, then there's that marathon, okay, to catch up with the 19 games for the second part of the season. You know, there's that. And Heidik Victor Okwi. Dick Okwi. Is it Dick Okwi or something? I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name, but if I am mispronouncing it, please accept my sincere apologies. But hi to you too. Good to have you on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel. If you haven't already, I know it's not your first time here with us, but it's a pleasure to have you back on the broadcast. So, when it comes to January, then you have the FA Cup, you have the Premier League, which usually comes in midweek. And because of the extended new version of the UEFA Champions League, because what what used to happen in the past with the previous format of the UEFA Champions League is, but by the time we got to December, for the winter break for the Spanish La Liga, the Italian Serie A, you had all the 6 group stage games done and dusted for the UEFA Champions League. And then teams would wait to play, would have to wait until February for the UEFA Champions League to return at the round of 16. Now, with the new format that increases the group stage games to as many as 8, you have to play that through December and into January by extension. And then, depending on where you finish on that table of the UEFA Champions League, you could have 2 games at the playoff. If you finish anywhere between 9th and 24th, you could have a set of 2 games, So that also piles on. So in the UK, you have the FA coming in the mix, the Premier League with a bit of its own congestion. Now, again, if you have advanced from the quarterfinals of the EFL Cup to the semi-finals, you also have that to worry about, because that also comes within that mix. So you have the EFL Cup, you have the FA Cup, you have the Champions League, and the Premier League. So those 2 months, really, actually 2-3 months, and by each stretch of things, it's actually a period of 4 months where you do not have international football or international breaks. Between November or after the November international break until the March international break that is due the subsequent year, this time around being 2026. You look at that, and there's just game after game. Every 3 days, you're playing a game of football. Every 3 days, every 3 to 4 days, you're playing a game of football. So the reason as to why I'm alluding to this is I was saying that I'm happy for Arsenal is that they have started welcoming back many of their players from injury, some which have been long term. For example, Noni Madueke was out for 8 weeks. Martin Odegaard almost the same. Gabriel Jesus has been out for 10 months, of course, with that anterior cruciate ligament. He's yet to return to the bench. But Gabriel Martinelli, all those are returnees from injuries. And then Kai Havertz and Victor Gyökeres are sort of around the corner. Mikel Arteta, in his pre-match press conference, he was saying that they're going to undergo scans, this week to assess whether they can be available for the weekend against Chelsea. And we know that, was it last season, or I think it was last season, but when Arsenal beat up against Chelsea and Kai Havertz scored a brace in that one, really. So the idea of Arsenal welcoming back, Victor Gyökeres, Kai Havertz, Gabriel Jesus, and of course, Gabriel Magalhaes will still be out through injury, is really, really very significant, especially given the kind of period for which they're destined into. Yesterday I was one of those asking for Yohan Timber to be rested, and somebody said, no, this is not the game for it. And my response to that was that's what we tell ourselves until a player gets injured, and then we realize we have to play with our team, and yet we should have made the changes earlier, because I do not think that Ben White is that incapable. But again, you have Chelsea coming up. After Chelsea, there's a midweek game against Brentford. Maybe the advantage for Arsenal, that game against Brentford is going to be at home, but the Chelsea game is away from home. Then you have Aston Villa, and that's 3 games coming up really, really fast. So you take it back to Tottenham Hotspur. You play on Sunday, play Bayern on Wednesday, play again on Sunday against Chelsea, play on Wednesday against Brentford, and play against Aston Villa, possibly on Sunday. So you can see how action is coming thick and fast, And then after that, I think after playing Aston Villa, you go away to Club Brugge in the UEFA Champions League, and then return home to play. You see, it just comes thick and fast. So if you're going to have a very reliable team, you're obviously going to have to rotate some of these players. So, for example, I do not know what will have happened then. But for example, you look at the game like after the Chelsea game, I mean, that midweek game against Brentford, changes ought to be made. Changes ought to be made. When you extend it to the game against Club Brugge in the UEFA Champions League in about a fortnight, you ought to make some changes therein, you know? So let's just wait and see how things go. But I thought Arsenal had a very, very wonderful game in that second half. Jurriën Timber, oh my God, what a player. Jurriën Timber, very effective, very energetic. He caused Bayern Munich some problems. He scored a goal. Eberechi Eze, I thought had a decent game. You know, Martin Zubimendi, beautiful performance. I saw people wanting to critique Lewis Kelly because it was his wing that was used for that equalizer for Bayern Munich. But no, one, that was the strategy of Bayern Munich to play that kind of game. First of all, they win the ball back. Once they win the ball back within their own half, they have the capability to go with that long pass, especially a diagonal one, and switch it. And basically, that's what they did. I think it was Jonathan Tah who was in possession. I don't know if it's him who plays the long pass or Joshua Kimmich. It goes into the left wing where Serge Gnabry runs to it and with the first up crosses it for Leonid Carl who scores. Now, the reason as to why I do not want to blame Lewis Kelly for it is because Bayern Munich simply realized that, you know, Arsenal's left back is inverting and overlapping at the same time. So he's oftentimes leaving a chunk of space. And that's how Arsenal play. They really play in this sort of format where it's more like a revolving door, where you do not have a particular player occupying a particular position. You know, so they keep almost rotating in positions. There's a moment in defending where you had Jurriën Timber literally playing at left back, you know, in terms of regaining ball possession. So they simply identified that place. So it's because of how Mikel Arteta asks his team to play that caused them that problem. And we've seen that Arsenal have sort of conceded goals on the transition, really, you know. So, and Bayern Munich are very good on the transition. So, and that ball was played there more than once. And even on another occasion, it almost caused them problems. So usually, I seem to remember explaining this to you guys in the aftermath of the Burnley game, you know, because how Arsenal play is that you have your goalkeeper, who is a ball-playing goalkeeper. You have two centre-backs. For example, yesterday it was William Saliba and Christian Mosquera. Now, the goalkeeper and the two centre-backs initiate play between them. Now, depending on how the build-up is going, the full-backs are going to move forward. You have Jurriën Timber sort of overlapping. You'll have the left back inverting. Now, when the left back inverts, or both full-backs invert, what you have to is more like putting the balloon inside out, you know, a kind of putting the balloon inside out kind of moment where then Martin Zubimendi and Declan Rice then pull out of midfield and sort of come and spread within these sort of wing positions of the fullbacks. So you'll have Martin Zubimendi move to the right back position and you have Declan Rice, who is the left-sided midfielder or the eighth, move to the left back wall. Now, unfortunately for them, at that time, when that ball gets played there, Declan Rice was not in that position, you know. So that's how they play, you know. So it's intentional, really. And then once they are confident that they have the possession, then Declan Rice will go in front and Martin Zubimendi will be staying behind. And if you notice, when Martin Zubimendi ventures forward, Declan Rice is staying. So nobody is tied to a particular position. Again, you've seen yesterday, you saw William Saliba literally carrying that ball forward. So what happens when he carries the ball forward? You know, every time William Saliba carries that ball forward, you notice that Declan Rice will have stayed behind to stay as the other center back. So in one moment, you have him playing as a left back. In another moment, you have him playing as a center back, depending on how the game is moving. Up front, Supertube, hi Supertube, how are you doing, my brother? Up front, where you have this double force nine of Eberechi Eze and Mikel Merino, particularly based on the weekend games against Tottenham Hotspur and even yesterday against Bayern Munich, is that you have your forward in Mikel Merino are pulling so deep in midfield that then it questions the centre back. Are they going to track him? Are they going to be, because you see, it's not as simple as you think. Whereas William Saliba did it, he did not overdo it. He sort of knew when to catch up with Harry Kane. So if you allow Mikel Merino drag you as a centre back to come with him, remember he's a midfielder naturally. So he's coming sort of in a comfortable zone for himself in midfield. So that means you've created yourself a gap that then Eberechi Eze or Bukayo Saka or Leandro Trossard is going to run into that space that you've created, the void that you've created, in you dragging yourself out with Mikel Merino. So they cause that sort of disruption with that kind of movement. Again, you saw when Noni Madueke is brought on for Leandro Trossard, at some point, because Bukayo Saka, he also knows that, I think he also knows it, that Madueke is more comfortable at the right. There's a moment where they switch the wings. So there's no single Arsenal player that is sort of besides the goalkeeper that is tied to a particular position, and maybe the centre backs. Again, but it all depends on a certain moment in the game. You remember the free kick that Declan Rice takes, and it sort of flies over everybody's head, bounces to the floor. Guess who was lashing onto it, head it on target? It was Christian Mosquera, and good enough, Neuer was there to save. But that was in a set piece moment, and we know that during set pieces, defenders come up. But there's also a moment where Christian Mosquera tracks Harry Kane way deep into the Bayern Munich half. So that fluidity of the Arsenal team, that playing more like a revolving door, that nothing is static, nothing is static. Nope. So I think it's only going to get better for Arsenal. Of course, they're going to be in a very, very difficult period. They're going in for a very, very, very important, but also very difficult period of the season. And this period between now until next year's international break is critical because you need to maintain yourself in that position of the table, in those positions of the table. You're not just competing, but also trying to create a health gap between you and the teams chasing you. And if you can't create that gap, we know that Arsenal have done this before. And for those of you that care to remember, I did pose a question on the channel for which we had a discussion. That question was, can Arsenal stand the pressure of being top? We did that video in October, and a lot of people say, and remember I said in that video that yes, they have the capability of doing that because we saw them doing it in the 2022-2023 season, when they were longest at the summit of the Premier League table. Really, they never went on to win the Premier League title for 248 days. So you need to stay at the summit, but now this time around you have to see it out. But the way for you to achieve that is by creating a healthy gap, because they will know that Man City twice. Yes, apologies on that. Power went off, and it's something that has happened on more occasions than we would prefer. And it's not pretty. It's not always good when power goes off in the midst of a broadcast. You remember, for those of you that were part of what? Was it last night or the other night? I think it was the other night. Power went off in the midst of a broadcast. We had to wait for it to return and things like that. Really, it's never pretty. So, and once power goes out, so does our internet. So, which then causes, all sorts of disruptions for us on this podcast. But we are back to see out this one, and yeah, all I can say is that I think we had almost come to the tail end of our discussion here. So do let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section. Let's continue to engage on these matters or matters football, and I'll see you guys next time. Stay blessed for now. Have a wonderful day. If power does return, if circumstances align, we'll be back tonight to discuss the latest. But maybe before we sign out, let me give you some of the games not to miss out on in as far as the UEFA Europa League is concerned, because that action does get underway today. AC Roma against Midtjylland at 8:45 p.m. Aston Villa will be up against Young Boys at 8:45 p.m. FC Porto against Nice, Fenerbahce against Ferencváros. Celtic will be away to Feyenoord. Lille are up against Dinamo Zagreb. Ludogorets will take on Celta Vigo. PAOK FC will be up against Brann, while Victoria Pilsen will take on Freiburg. That's in the early kickoffs at 8:45 p.m. Hi, Pedri. What's up? Good to have you on the broadcast. How is your morning? Buenos días. And ¿cómo estás? I'm trying to learn. Anyways, go ahead. Eagles will be up against VfB Stuttgart. FC Basel will take on Genk. That will be Basel away. Crvena Zvezda will be up against FCSB, while Bologna will take on Salzburg. Maccabi Tel Aviv will be up against Olympic Lyon. Nottingham Forest will take on Maramo, while Panathinaikos will be up against Sturm Graz. Rangers will take on Braga, while Real Betis will be up against Utrecht. In the UEFA Conference League, particularly looking out for that game involving Crystal Palace, but there's plenty of action to come your way. Crystal Palace will be up against French side Strasbourg, one of the very decent sides in as far as the French league is concerned, guys. So, but like I said, guys, power is off. So is internet. We've had to improvise just to wrap up this particular broadcast. So allow me wish you a blessed day. And if, like I said, if the stars do align, I will be back to discuss more of the football. We'll put out some shots. Go check those out. Please watch. Continue to watch our, content. Those that watch our broadcasts long after they've ended, we do not take your time for granted. We do appreciate you a great deal. Have yourselves a blessed day, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye for now.